And thanks for staying with us, everyone. First up, the inflation rate for March 2025 slowed to 22.4%, down from 23.1% in February, according to data released by the Ghana Statistical Service in Accra today. The decline is attributed to a slowdown in the general price levels of certain food items, marking the second consecutive drop in food prices. This is the lowest inflation rate the country has seen since November 2024. Here's Government Statistician Professor Samuel Kobneni.
Highlights for March 2025 rate of inflation. In the month of March 2025, year-on-year inflation stood at 22.4%, which simply means that general price levels of goods and services between March 2024 and March 2025 went up by 22.4%. This indicates a slowdown in rate of inflation, as year-on-year inflation for the month of February 2025 stood at 23.1%, slowing down by 0.7 percentage points to 22.4% for March 2025. Disaggregating this from a food and non-food perspective, we recorded a 7.8 percentage point difference between food inflation, which stood at 26.5%, and non-food inflation, which stood at 18.7%. In the month of March 2025, we have recorded a much sharper decline in food inflation, which declined by 1.6 percentage points, and a marginal decline in non-food inflation, which declined by 0.1 percentage points between February 2025 and March 2025. From a locally produced item and inflation on an imported item perspective, we recorded a 5.3 percentage point difference, with inflation on locally produced items 24.0% for the month of March 2025 relative to 18.7% for inflation on imported items, leading to the 5.3 percentage point difference between inflation for locally produced items and inflation on imported items. From a regional perspective, we recorded approximately a 2 times difference between the region that recorded the highest rate of inflation, which was Upper West region, which recorded a rate of inflation of 36.2%, relative to the Volta region, which recorded the lowest rate of inflation of 18.9% for the month of March 2025. From a month-on-month perspective, general price levels of goods and services went up by 0.2% in the month of March 2025, indicating a 1.1 percentage point difference monthly inflation between February 2025, which stood at 1.3%, relative to 0.2% for the month of March 2025. Disaggregating monthly inflation from a food and non-food perspective, we saw general price levels of food prices between February and March 2025 going down by 0.2%, in other words, termed as deflation for the month of March 2025.
And joining me on Zoom with reaction is Head of Finance at UMB Capital, Nelson Kujo-Kwagbeji. Good afternoon to you, sir. Your thoughts on the March inflation rate, and what's your assessment based on the trend we've seen from the beginning of the year? Can you hear me, Nelson? Can you hear me, Nelson?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Derek, for. I think that.
You're muted.
Can you hear me, Derek?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Right. So thank you very much. As I did, the for the was 23%. Then it came down 23.5% in January, and then 23.1% in February, and currently 22.4% in the month of March. I think the economy is actually responding to the overall policies that the government is implementing, both at the fiscal policy level and at the monetary policy level. So I think the reduction in inflationary pressure for the consecutive 3 months basically has to do with the policy that the government is implementing, and these policies having positive impact on the overall economy.
Right. We are told that the slowdown in the inflation rate is because of the drop in the prices of certain food items. How sustainable is this trend, though?
Well, the medium term, the trend is manageable. It's manageable within the medium term. However, within the medium to long term, I think the government has to be deliberate and intentional about policies within the agri sector Don't forget that per the data released by the Ghana Statistical Service, food supply continued to be a major driver of our inflationary basket. And so the government has to be more intentional. The government has to be more deliberate on policies within the agri sector. Within the short term, that may be manageable because of the policy that the Bank of Ghana and the Finance Ministry implement. But going forward, we need to invest more in agriculture in order to curb the food inflation that is driving the overall inflation of the country.
And it's interesting, we are seeing the March inflation figures coming just days after the Bank of Ghana increased the policy rate to 28%. How might this affect inflation going forward and consumer behavior?
All right. The monetary policy, as I did indicate, is one angle of taming inflation. The monetary policy rate was at 27%, but it was increased by 100 basis points to 28%. The overall objective of the Bank of Ghana in increasing the monetary policy rate to 28% is to mop up excess liquidity within the system. And once excess liquidity mop up from the system, what it technically means is that consumers or businesses may not have money to spend, and that is going to help in taming inflation. In terms of the businesses, what is also going to happen is that once the MPR has gone up, lending rate will also go up. And businesses may not be willing to incur higher capital costs, and so they may also shy away from the traditional banking borrowing to fund their business. And that may also slow down in one way or the other the performance of the economy. Then in terms of individuals, just as it affects businesses, individuals may also shy away from borrowing. So there are two things involved. They either reduce expenditure or they postpone expenditure. And so the increment in the monetary policy rate to 28% will help Bank of Ghana to mop up excess liquidity within the system in order to tame inflation.
Yeah, we know that that's the reason the central bank increased the policy rate in order to tame inflation. Again, how effectively would this work? Plus, inflation is slowing down. What does this mean for economic stability going forward? Are we headed the right direction, you think?
Well, I think generally yes, because the objective of every government in terms of economic management is to tame inflation. And so if inflation is coming down, I think that the general economy is responding positively to both the fiscal policy being implemented and the monetary policy. So I think that the marginal reduction in inflation over the period is a significant boost, and for that matter, a major achievement for the economy. Don't forget, when inflation goes up, it doesn't affect only the government, it affects business, it affects individuals too. And so the reduction is a good omen. The reduction is a good indication that the financial health of the economy is gradually picking up.
Yeah, and I want to find out what your outlook is for this second quarter of the year. We just stepped into the second quarter of the year. What do you think would be the outlook, and what should the government be doing, really?
Well, I think the government should continue doing what they are doing because, as I indicate, the economy is responding positively to their policies. The Bank of Ghana, the regulator, must also do as much as possible to tame inflation by, continuously and constantly monitoring and evaluating their policies. They must try as much as possible to mop up excess liquidity in the system, because once there is too much cash in the system, spending goes up. Once spending goes up, inflation is better. So I think going forward, the Bank of Ghana should continuously monitor its policy that they are implementing, while the government, through the Minister of Finance, also works on their fiscal policies. Because cumulatively, both the monetary policy and the fiscal policy measures will come together, to tame inflation.
All right. Just one more question. This just breaking a few minutes ago. President Mahama fulfilling his campaign promise, giving assent to the bills to abolish the betting tax, E-Levy, and the emissions tax, amongst others. How significant is this in easing the burden on Ghanaians and driving economic growth? Your reaction to that?
Hello, please, can you come again?
Yeah, I was just saying, just as we were going on air, those news that the president had assented to the bills abolishing E-Levy, betting tax, and emissions tax. I just wanted your reaction on how this is going to ease the burden on the Ghanaian public and also drive economic growth.
All right, sure. You recall that the cancellation of the E-Levy was received as a good news by businesses and individuals in this country. You also recall that mobile money transaction has significantly reduced as a result of the implementation of the E-Levy. And so once the president has assented to the bill, technically, one, we expect financial inclusion to be enhanced. We also expect mobile money transaction levels to go up, and that will also translate into revenue for the telecommunication companies. So I think that the cancellation of those levies is a good news for businesses and individuals. Now, when you also take the betting levy into consideration, it was one of the topical issues that was discussed during the election period. And I think that has also brought some relief to young men and women who are investors within the domain of betting. So I think generally it's a good news. Businesses will respond positively to that. Individuals and households will also respond positively to the cancellation of those levies because they were considered to be nuisance levies or nuisance taxes for the Ghanaian economy. In any case, E-Levy itself has not contributed significantly towards the domestic revenue mobilization. The idea behind the E-Levy, once the E-Levy comes on board, then the tolls will be taken up. But you realize that the quantum of revenue that we were generating from the tolls was much better and higher than that of E-Levy. And so I think the cancellation is a step in the right direction. It's going to boost economic activity. It's going to increase significantly mobile money transaction, and it's also going to promote, financial inclusion and even rake in the informal sector who are not really within the banking system. Don't forget, in our villages, the only source of financial transaction is mobile money, and we take it off of these levies. That is going to enhance and promote the inclusivity within the banking sector.
All right, Nelson Kujo Kwagweji, Head of Finance, UMB Capital, appreciate your analysis and insight. Thank you, as always. Well, the ranking member of Parliament's Economic Committee, Kojo Oponkuma, is cautioning the government may face a liquidity crisis in the coming months. This warning comes after the government failed to meet its Treasury bills target for the second time this year, attributed to declining rates, whilst the Bank of Ghana has also raised its policy rate. Mr. Oponkuma argues that these developments could have negative implications for the broader economy.
The investor is of the view that the central bank instruments can give him returns higher than inflation. He will, switch to that, and the government will begin to find some more liquidity problems on the short end of the market because they are using T-bills to manage liquidity. And if people begin to move, even if people don't move towards the forex side and they move towards the BOG's instruments, the government will begin to have liquidity challenges. If the investor is also of the view that the inflationary pressures are so high that even what the BOG is promising, they don't have much confidence in it, they will go towards the forex market, and that will begin to put pressure on the currency as well. And that is why it's important for the BOG and the Finance Ministry to get their act together and have a certain commonality of purpose. But for us, what is even more interesting is for a government that, when in opposition, argued that we shouldn't talk about external economic developments and that it was our mismanagement that had translated into inflation of about 54%. It is so interesting that their first MPC meeting, they are now all of a sudden beginning to warn that, oh, look at the tariff wars that are happening between America, China, and Canada and Mexico. Oh, look at the challenges, on the Black Sea side, and this could translate into higher inflationary pressures. It is telling, and it is telling that the things that they pretended they were not aware of when they were in opposition, now that they are in the Bank of Ghana and managing things, they have to admit it. They can't run away from those facts.
All right. Today, prices of petroleum products are expected to see a slight increase at the pumps, according to an internal document that outlines the pricing structure for oil marketing companies in the country. More details in the following report.
Showed that petrol is expected to go up by some 2%, representing a litre of petrol being sold at 15 cedis, 20 pesos. Diesel will be sold at 15 cedis, 32 pesos, representing a little over 1% hike in value. LPG, on the other hand, will go down below a percentage per kilogram. The increase, according to the oil marketing firms, have been influenced by rising price of crude oil and some finished petroleum products on the international market. However, This time round, the cedi was not a contributing factor, as data from the oil companies even showed that in the last week of March, the cedi appreciated against the US dollar after some sustained stability over the past weeks. Some of the oil marketing companies have also told Joy Business that they might keep prices unchanged, citing competition as the major reason. There are currently more than 100 oil marketing companies in the country.
All right, you're watching The Marketplace. We're taking a short break. We will be right back. All right, thanks for staying with us, everyone. Time to talk tech. In studio with me, Henry Kobler-Lee for Eyes of Africa. It's always a pleasure having you in studio. I mean, we just covered international news where we are covering stories about Trump's Day of Liberation. He's going to announce some tariffs. Or we could say here in Ghana too, they've got a Day of Liberation because the president just assented to some new bills, including the repeal of the E-Levy betting tax. I mean, we've been talking about that a lot, that news breaking over the past 1 hour. What's going to be the impact? Just a minute. I just want your reaction to that.
I think that we've been waiting for it. And so generally we're looking at implementation quite on most of the tech platforms. I'm thinking that this should be easy to taking it off most of the banking and then mobile application platforms. I'm looking forward to, apart from it being repealed, how we're going to now utilize and pushing the digital agenda in the country. Not necessarily just putting out taxes, but also how we're going to make significant investment into different infrastructures that is going to help the advancement of digital financing in our country.
Yeah, great stuff. Also, there was an AI conference, if you like, here in Ghana. The Minister of Communication, Digital Technology and Innovation, Samuel Nate George, announced that government was going to develop a one-stop shop data exchange hub to power artificial intelligence for national development. What's your understanding of what this hub is?
Daryl, so I'll tell you this. Over the last 2 weeks, I was in the UK, where I experienced close to almost about 300 different AI application and companies that are sitting in the UK. You could really understand that there's a lot of effort by every country in terms of the strategy, in terms of the infrastructure in itself, and then the advancement in itself. But I'm thinking that, yes, it's a good one where we look at bringing all the data sets together and then doing some sort of level of like exchange. But I'm looking at how the policy is really going to go. Again, the implementation. I mean, he'd also looked at building an LLM in itself so that it could be trained into local languages and all of that. I'm looking at it as a very extensive point where you need a lot of strategy investment. I mean, OpenAI just got investment, almost about 30 billion into it. Wow. I mean, and this is shaking, and so definitely they're looking at deploying quite a lot of models. So if you're looking at building your own LLM, that's a lot of competition to already what is existing. Can we start looking at what is existing? Can we build on it? Can we have a strategy point? Can we have policy document and directions where we get to be safer but still get to be building on these platforms? I think that it's better off. Most of these foreign platforms which he had described really are still dependent on African data sets. They still need these data sets. And I think that when we are able to strategically position ourselves in there, we don't need to do a lot of investments like they're doing, but we can still take advantage of it.
I mean, you point out infrastructure challenges, rightly so, and so it makes you wonder if they're able to do this, how is it going to benefit the country?
I mean, there's a lot of benefits where you're bringing almost every data. You're going to be easy on data analytics in terms of businesses, being able to tap into that data set to make business sense of the economy, which we basically have around us, how we can do growth trajectories around us. I think all of them comes into play for a lot of businesses, even for the government in terms of policy directions. In terms of our growth in the digital economy, I think it also comes into it. Our adaptations into technologies like machine learning and then cryptocurrencies or blockchain in itself also comes into play because we have the data sets all in one place and being able to take advantage of. My only problem really has always been how government treats these kinds of innovations they sort of bring on board. I mean, look at what we spoke about it in terms of NITA last week and how it's just been thrown out there. I mean, somebody's making off the money of it whilst government really is never making anything of it. So really that has always been the problem. The initiatives and then the ideas always gets to be, it has to be some level of investment put in, but how sustainable do we get to run this? And that's the question we have to be asking.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very great that we're having a conversation on AI as a country and we are looking at creating a data exchange hub. but we still have issues to do with ethical and regulatory considerations. I don't know if we have a clear path on that right now.
I think that different countries are now approaching this in different ways. I mean, when you're looking at the AI conference, which was held in France, and the UK and the US decided not to sign to that agreement because they really want to go all out on the AI policy points. I think that the EU basically would always have some level of safety guidelines and policies and all of that. We here, what are we looking at? How beneficial is it going to be for us? I think that has to be a conversation we need to also ask ourselves. I think that the minister has already made that point to say that he's looking into reviewing the strategy that, the AI strategy that was worked on with GIZ. I think it's a good point, but there has to be a lot of stakeholder engagement because the AI is not sort of affecting just policy points. It's also going to trickle down to a lot of businesses, SMEs, digital financial companies and all of that. I think there has to be an open point of shareholder engagement to it. But I think that it's in a good way going to help us.
I'm told I have 30 seconds. I'm going to ask you about this other story I saw, which I thought was pretty interesting. MTN Ghana saying, Starlink is not a threat. Your thoughts? Really,
it's not a threat. I think that if you're looking at MTN in itself, it's gone way beyond just providing internet solutions. I mean, so I don't think it's been a threat. They're also making some level of investment into wireless and then fiber directly into homes. And I think that they will basically be able to compete with Starlink.
Great stuff. Lead Eyes of Africa, Henry Kobler, thank you so much for joining us for The Marketplace. More news on our website, myjoyonline.com/business. My name is Darryl Kwa. Thanks for watching. We'll see you same time tomorrow.